Over the coming weeks and months, the leadership team at our church will be making some pretty significant decisions about what it will look like for our church family to step out of isolation and into the future that God has for us. We're still working through the details of that plan, and we'll be sure to keep you up to date with any developments on that front. And there'll be an opportunity for you to let us know what you're thinking and how you're feeling. But at this stage, at this early stage, we'd like to let you know the 4 principles in many ways that are shaping our every decision. These are 4 values which act as our guiding lights as we navigate our way through these uncharted waters. And the first principle is this: watch out for one another. Watch out for one another. In Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 to 25, the author is writing this letter to a group of Jewish Christians who were at risk of giving up on the gospel. They were at risk of dropping out of the race of faith. And he encourages them, he motivates them with this invitation. Let us watch out for one another, to provoke love and good works, not neglecting to gather together as some are in the habit of doing. You see, these Jewish Christians, they were facing a fight on 2 fronts, as it were. There was an enemy without and an enemy within. On the outside, well, they were being persecuted for following the Lord Jesus Christ. Not yet to the point of shedding blood, but if you read chapter 10, you'll realize that their reputations were being slandered. Their houses were being plundered. Now, the persecution was real, and the heat was on for them to give up on the gospel, to drop out of the race. But quite possibly, even more significant than the threat without was the enemy within. It was their own hearts. In chapter 5, the author warns them that they're spiritually immature. Gosh, they're at risk of being spiritually lazy. In many ways, they'd let themselves go. And so when you combine that external threat of pressure with that internal threat of slackness, well, that's a cocktail, a recipe for spiritual disaster. And if they didn't watch it, that's exactly where they were headed. Well, friends, as you think about it, and as we reflect on that enemy without and enemy within, well, we can resonate with that on some level, can't we? You know, right now for us, on the outside, we've got a set of government restrictions. And those restrictions are good and appropriate to care for our physical health and well-being. We wouldn't have it any other way. But the reality is that those external restrictions do make it much harder for us to follow Jesus together. But just like the Jewish Christians, you know what? It may be the case that the greater threat is the enemy within. The greater threat actually may just be our own hearts. I've got one date for you guys to contemplate. Here it is, one date, the 22nd of June, 2020. Now, does that ring any bells? Does that resonate with you on some level? I know that for some of the guys in our church, they're longing for that date. Because on the 22nd of June 2020, indoor gyms right across our state will start to reopen. One of the guys in our church just last week told me, he said, Adam, over the last few weeks, it's been so easy for me to not exercise. It's been too easy for me to not go out for a run or not to do any weight work. And as it's been all too easy for me to not physically exercise, I felt my muscles just atrophy and waste away. And I thought to myself, well, oh gosh, I worry that the same thing might be happening with me spiritually. Because just think about it. Isn't it all too easy for us to just log on to church now? We don't even have to get into our cars, leave our own homes, leave our own rooms, gosh, maybe even leave our own beds to attend church. And so the great risk for us is that we'll go to the other side of isolation. And when it's time for us to physically regather as a church, some of us just won't want to. Because attending church online was just all too easy. Do you see, friends? The great risk for us in this season right now is that our spiritual muscles will atrophy and waste away. And the author of Hebrews is warning us. He's urging us. He says, don't let that happen. We were made to run this race together as a family. And the best way to stop ourselves from falling away from Christ is to run together, to gather together, to meet physically together. Now, as a church family, there'll be some decisions that we'll have to make over what ministries are we currently doing online that we want to keep online versus what ministries are we doing online that we want to move back to in-person gatherings. And undoubtedly, there will be some things, I'm sure, that'll continue online. But let me set our expectations right now. As a church family, we run this race primarily by physically gathering together. Wherever we can, we want to favour coming together in person as the people of God. The word church literally means gathering. What kind of gathering, what kind of church would we be if we hardly ever physically gathered? Friends, I know the temptations to comfort are great, but the truth is that church doesn't exist for our comfort. Church exists for God's glory in the Lord Jesus Christ. And He receives all the glory when we gather together and are a visible symbol and picture to the world of the world to come. So when we come back together, and as we make decisions about what it looks like for us to regather, I want you to know that at every turn, unashamedly, we will favour physically coming together again. Because on the last day, we won't just be dialing in around the throne or zooming in as we worship God around the throne. No, every tribe will be physically gathered around the throne of Christ as we worship Him as the King of the world.